Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. New water heater regulations are coming. Are you ready? Sponsored by Bradford White Water Heaters. My name is Candace Rullo, Senior Editor of Contractor Magazine. I will be your host for today's event. Before we begin, let me explain how you can participate in today's presentation. First of all, if you have any technical difficulties during today's session, please press the Help button on your player console to receive assistance in solving common issues. We welcome your questions during today's event. In order to submit your question to today's presenter, simply type your question into the question window on the left-hand side of your screen and then hit the Submit button. We'll be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation. But please feel free to send in your questions at any time and we'll add them to the queue. If at any time you're having audio difficulties or the advancing of the slides, simply hit your F5 button to refresh your webcast console. Please also be aware that today's sessions are being recorded and will be available within the next week for you to review. You will be notified by email when the archive is available. And now let me introduce today's presenter. Chad Sanborn is the Product Marketing Manager for Bradford White Water Heaters. He has been in the water heater industry for over 13 years, supporting the growth and development of Bradford White in various capacities. In 2001, Chad began his career in the production areas of Bradford White's Middleview, Michigan water heaters manufacturing facility. Using his hands-on product experience, Chad transitioned into the engineering department in 2007, where he expanded his knowledge and influence by working with the testing procedures and standards for residential and commercial water heaters. In 2011, Chad was promoted to the sales and marketing team, where he currently holds the position of Product Marketing Manager. In his current role, he manages all products for Bradford White Corporation and works collaboratively with the sales and engineering teams to develop Bradford White's short and long-term water heater product development and marketing strategies. Chad holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Business Management from Cornerstone University and is an active participant in many plumbing, engineering, and manufacturing trade organizations. With the introduction out of the way, let me now turn things over to Chad. Chad, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Candace. First, I'd like to thank Contracting Business and Contractor Magazine for allowing Bradford White the opportunity to present to really the whole industry on the 2015 water heater efficiency standards. Since there's such a diverse array of viewers and awareness levels, we decided to keep this presentation somewhat basic to really fully understand what this change is and what it means for everybody. So a few things that this presentation will cover. Today we're going to talk about the NAECA DOE final rule and what the definition of that rule is. We'll talk about the products affected by the change. We'll talk about some considerations, how these changes will affect everybody that's listening. And then we'll follow up with the Q&A presentation afterwards. So this discussion is not intended to cover any specific Bradford White product promotions. It's also not intended to cover any specific analysis of Bradford White products versus competitor products. And of course, it's not intended to cover any of the specific product pricing details. So what is the final rule? What is NAECA? Essentially, NAECA stands for the National Appliance Energy Conservation Act. This act mandates virtually all energy factors for water heaters. This act also mandates that certain other appliances such as washers or dryers or freezers maintain minimum efficiencies. The DOE is the one who changes these efficiencies. Their authority comes from NAECA. This act, this third revision to NAECA, is effective April 16th, 2015. So virtually all residential and some light-duty commercial gas, electric, oil, and tankless water heaters are affected by this change. It's really important to notice this last bullet point on the slide. The DOE only sets the new standards. They don't tell manufacturers how to design water heaters to meet these new standards. This chart that's present on the screen right now represents all water heaters that are affected by NAECA 3. So let's go line by line just so we can get a full understanding of what products are affected by this change. So as NAECA defines water heaters or residential water heaters, they define gas-fired water heaters as residential water heaters that are equal to or greater than 20 gallons and equal to or less than 100 gallons, all equal to or less than 75,000 BTU per hour of input. Oil-fired products that are regulated by this change are equal to or less than 50 gallons and equal to or less than 105,000 BTU per hour. Electric products that are affected by the change are products that are equal to 20 gallons through equal to or less than 120 gallons, all equal to or less than 12 kW of input. Tankless gas products are equal to or less than 2 gallons and equal to or less than 200,000 BTU per hour. And tankless electric products are equal to or less than 2 gallons and equal to or less than 12 kW of input. Now this formula on the far right side of the screen is what NAECA regulates. They state that we as a manufacturer must produce product that is equal to or better than the energy factor as calculated from that formula. So in this instance, the V stands for volume. One would put in a certain capacity for the volume and calculate the minimum energy factor that is required to produce that product. So looking closer at just gas products, to try to put this into perspective and make it a little easier to understand. So looking at tankless products, today's current standard is a 0.62 energy factor. After April 16th, 2015, the new energy factor will have to be a 0.82. These formulas that we're looking at on the screen were a copy and paste from that previous slide. So you can see what the minimums are. Looking closely at the 40-gallon for an example, today's minimum EF to produce a 40-gallon gas water heater must be a 0.59 energy factor. After April 16th, 2015, in order for a manufacturer to produce a 40-gallon gas water heater, it will have to be at least a 0.62. Now, water heater manufacturers produce products that meet the minimums today. They also produce products that go above and beyond the minimums, such as Energy Star water heaters. Looking at the right-hand side of that screen, products above 55 gallons, this is a more radical change. So kind of zeroing in on a 60-gallon product, you can see that the minimum today to produce a 60-gallon gas water heater is a 0.56. After April 16th, it will have to be a 0.75. So some changes less than 55 gallons will be minor. Other changes above 55 gallons will be more radical. So what does that mean? Looking at products, gas products below 55 gallons, essentially they're changing. If the product doesn't currently meet the new minimum energy factors, the product will have to increase in size to meet the new energy factors. So you can see products growing anywhere from up to 2 inches in height and 2 inches larger in diameter. Some other options that manufacturers may have or have chosen would be damper technology, and or you could put in a lesser capacity heater. So essentially a 40-gallon becomes a 30-gallon, or a 50-gallon becomes a 40-gallon. Gas products above 55 gallons, this is the more radical change. So in order for a product to comply with the new energy factors, these products would have to incorporate condensing technology. These units are larger, heavier units than non-condensing products. These products have more flue tubes, so they're heavier, possibly bigger flue tubes, different types of venting, such as PVC, CPVC, or ABS in some areas. These products require additional insulation. They require blowers, electronics controls. They also have a need for condensate disposal, so they'll require 120-volt electricity to plug in. There may be some new code requirements instituted as well, such as condensate removal and things like that. Looking closer at the electric products, products below 55 gallons are on the left-hand side of the screen. Products above 55 gallons are on the right-hand side of the screen. So again, these same formulas that were on that original chart have been copied and pasted into this slide to get a better representation of what that means for all of us. Picking out a 40-gallon for an example here. today's minimum energy factor must be a 0.92 as a manufacturer to produce that product. After April 16th, along with all capacities below 55 gallons, the heater will have to be a 0.95 energy factor or greater. Products above 55 gallons, this is a much more radical change. So looking at an 80-gallon product, for an example, a 0.86 minimum energy factor today. After April 16th, in order to produce that same 80-gallon electric water heater, it'll have to be a 1.97 minimum EF. So what does this mean? Looking at in specific products less than 55 gallons, if the product doesn't meet the 0.95 energy factor today, it will grow in size. So it will be roughly 2 inches taller or up to 2 inches taller and up to 2 inches bigger in diameter. So another option that a manufacturer may have or an installer may have would be to put in a lesser capacity unit in the same footprint. Products above 55 gallons, these are the more radical changes. So in order to achieve above a 1.0 energy factor, these products will have to incorporate heat pump technology. So most heat pumps today require about 700 to 1,000 cubic feet of space to operate. The ambient room temperature certainly affects the performance of the water heater, and the water heater affects the temperature of the ambient air around it, so it'll cool the air. These water heaters require regular maintenance as there's filters, they might need to be cleaned. And these heat pump water heaters have a noise to them, whereas the standard electric product probably wasn't as noisy. There's compressors or blowers incorporated into heat pumps. And heat pumps also rid of condensate, so they have to find a way to dispose of that condensate. And just like residential condensing products, there may be new codes instituted as a result of these products. Looking at oil-fired water heaters, oil-fired water heaters didn't get off easy either. So the minimum, for an example, a 32-gallon oil-fired water heater, the minimum EF today is a 0.53. After April 16th, 2015, that new minimum energy factor will be a 0.62. What does this mean from a standpoint of a manufacturer or products as you'll see them? Most likely these will grow in size as well, so possibly 2 inches bigger in diameter or up to 2 inches taller. Some other possibilities that manufacturers may choose to meet the new energy factors would be incorporating additional heat transfer techniques or additional flue tubes or a different construction of heat exchanger. Also, a manufacturer may choose to discontinue the product line. So some general considerations to think about when you're thinking about NAECA 2015. Regarding storage, do you have proper space to store taller, wider, or heavier products? Transportation, will your current vehicles allow for proper moving of handling of taller, wider, and heavier products? This is probably most important regarding heat pumps and or other water heaters as well that cannot be laid down on their side during transportation. Heat pumps are really tall. They may not fit into current trucks. Will you need more than one person to load and unload a product? Is this installation a one or two person job? Will it be an in and out replacement? Does this existing space accommodate for potentially larger product? Will the venting and condensate need to be changed or added? Regarding ongoing maintenance, will additional site visits for product maintenance be required following the installation? Regarding new construction, what water heater space and connection requirements do you need? And do you need to change traditional product specs? So possibly switching from an electric product that's always been used to maybe a gas product. And of course, costs. What challenges will customers have in paying for this higher cost equipment? So to recap, how do products change when April 16th, 2015 arrives? Now, keep in mind, April 16th, 2015 is strictly a manufacture date. We as manufacturers can no longer produce non-compliant products after April 16th. Any product that's in the pipeline, such as at a distributor or at a contractor's house or a warehouse, can still be sold and installed indefinitely after April 16th. Products that will change coming from the manufacturer will depend on class and volume. Minor in some cases, more radical in others. So for an example, gas water heaters above 55 gallons, but less than 75,000 BTU per hour, may need to be fully condensing based on today's technology to meet this standard. Products below 55 gallons will be more minor in some cases by increasing insulation or increasing the diameter of the water heater. Electric water heaters greater than 55 gallons, but less than 12 kW of input, will have an integrated heat pump configuration to meet these new standards. Electric product below 55 gallons will be more minor as well. They will have increased diameters to account for additional insulation to meet the new energy factors. So lastly, are you ready for 2015? What have you done to prepare for 2015? Bradford White's been ready, and we're here to help, committed to sharing information regarding these standards and their effect on the industry. So for additional information, please visit bradfordwhite.com or speak with a representative. Now I'd like to introduce Bruce Carnival, our Executive Vice President and COO, to help me answer questions that you may have from the field. Candace?
A few of you have already submitted questions, so we're just going to jump right in. While our presenters are answering your questions, please take a moment to answer the feedback form on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. So the first question is, why did the government make these water heater energy factor changes?
As Chad mentioned in his presentation, the authorization comes from NAECA. So it's federal law that requires the DOE to make periodic changes to the energy efficiency, the minimum energy efficiency requirement for virtually all appliances. Water heaters are included in that. So the process is the Department of Energy evaluates the available technologies and whether it's possible and feasible to incorporate higher energy efficiency standards. They then go out and work with all the interested parties, including manufacturers, environmental interests, contractor groups, and they basically come to a consensus as to whether it's possible to change the standards. And then they make a final determination, and at that point, they give the manufacturers a certain period of time. In the case of water heaters, it's 5 years to meet that standard. So it's really directed by DOE, but their authorization comes from the federal law that's called NAECA.
Okay, another question is, why can't heat pumps not be laid down when transporting?
Heat pumps cannot be laid down when transporting, typically because of the oils that are in the compressor. If they move to one side or the other, that's not intended to happen. There could be a failure in the heater when it's stood up and operated after that.
Okay, another question is, the new regulations don't apply to insulation levels on indirect tanks, do they?
That's a very good question. As it stands today, indirect fired water heaters are not incorporated into NAECA. So indirect fired water heaters do not incorporate an energy factor, thus are not affected by this change.
Okay, another question. This just came in from Mike. Can a customer install 2 to 50-gallon water heaters instead of an 80-gallon?
The answer to that is yes, but the result will be a lesser efficient installation. In some cases, either because of the cost of the new unit or because of some of the installation restrictions, it may not be possible to install the new technology, and that would be a possible option to take care of your customer and make sure that they have the hot water that they need for their application.
Okay, another question that just came in is, how will Bradford White handle warranty replacements between current products and the new 2015 products?
That's a great question, and our plan at this point is that we will issue credit for the water heater that has failed, and we'll leave it up to the contractor and the customer to decide what the best option is. And the reason for that is because, as we just discussed on the previous question, the decision might be that the homeowner and the contractor decide that the best option is to replace an 80-gallon heater with two 40s or two 50-gallon heaters. That may be required in some cases. Again, it's not the most energy efficient. But because there are going to be so many different options because the technologies change in certain applications, we feel that's probably the best and most streamlined. And honestly, we're still working through some of the details on that, but that's the position that Bradford White is taking right now, is we'll give credit for the failed model and allow the homeowner to make the decision which replacement they should use.
Great. Now, does this also include electric heaters? Because a question came in from Kevin, and he's asking, how will the 80-gallon electric heater warranties be handled?
Same thing.
Okay. Okay, this question is from Ross. How will higher ratings on gas units affect customer utility costs in percentage rates?
So, Candace, could you repeat that question?
Sure.
Please?
How will higher ratings on gas units affect customer utility costs in percentage rates?
Well, I think to answer that question is the higher ratings or the higher efficiency ratings on gas-fired product will ultimately reduce the amount of energy used. I can only assume that the utility cost then would drop, but that's going to be dependent upon the utility company.
Okay. A question from Kevin is, how long are water heater manufacturers planning to produce existing models?
Well, that will vary by manufacturer, but we believe that the demand will be mostly for the existing product prior to the introduction of the new products. So our plan is to continue to manufacture the current product all the way up until the deadline when we need to change over and start manufacturing the new product. There will be some instances where we start kind of integrating some of the newer products a little bit earlier, but for the most part, we're going to be manufacturing the current product as long as we can.
Okay, this is another question from Ross. How will new heaters be affected on recover rates?
That's a really good question. So efficiency and recovery rates is essentially similar. I like to describe it similar to horsepower and gas mileage. So as you increase gas mileage, sometimes horsepower is sacrificed as a result. The instance may be true for water heaters as well. So as energy factors increase, first hour deliveries and or recoveries potentially could be sacrificed as a result.
Okay, this is from Kevin. Since the warranty refund is a relatively new approach, when does it go into effect? April 16th?
It would go into effect when the new product is the option that's chosen. So, for example, if there were still a replacement in the channels of distribution that could be used, then the current policy would still apply. If that product were no longer available, then we would institute the new policy.
Okay. This question is from Barry. At this time, you make an 80-gallon dairy barn electric water heater. Will you make a 50-gallon model for the dairy industry to use?
That's a very good question. So that will depend on manufacturers at that point. A 50-gallon model certainly has been of interest, but we're open and willing to look at any scenario. So without answering yes or no, there you go.
Okay. This next question also involves warranty. So if there are any failures with the heat pump heaters, for instance, say a compressor burns out, will the compressor be replaced or the whole heater?
Well, at this point, the designs are that it is an integrated unit, so you cannot separate the heat pump, the compressor components from the water heater. So that would mean the replacement of the entire unit, whether it were a tank failure or a heat pump component failure.
Okay. See, next question is from Andrew, and he is wondering, will the residential heaters at 60, 55 gallons, for example, will they have vent dampers? Will it need to be hardwired with 120 volts or a receptacle which will allow a plug to be used?
Well, as the law is written right now, like I said earlier, the Act only regulates minimum energy factors. They don't regulate how the manufacturer will produce product to achieve those energy factors. So whereas one manufacturer may choose a dampered product that requires 120 volts and a receptacle to plug in, another manufacturer may not. They may have an opportunity to increase the water heater size or somehow restrict the flow of exhaust gases. So there will be a time where, and most likely a time after April, where multiple manufacturers will have different solutions to the result.
Okay, this is an interesting question here. Will HVAC licenses be required to install, repair the new heat pump style heaters?
That's a good question. So installing the heat pump water heater will not require EPA certification. It's my understanding that in order to, or if you have to service the sealed side of the water heater, so any refrigerant in the water heater, then an EPA certification would be required.
Okay. Now somebody is asking about warehousing and is wondering, will the new heaters have packaging that allows for clamp truck handling?
Well, I can speak for Bradford White, but I can't speak for the rest of the industry. Currently today, I believe all of the products are able to be clamped. I can only assume this would be true moving forward after April.
Okay. This question in from Richard. Do you have an estimate of when you will have spec sheets for the new model numbers?
We do, yes. That's been a hot topic here the last few weeks at Bradford White. It is our anticipation to have spec sheets available in early January.
Okay. Another question is, are there any lines of your product that you plan on discounting due to the changes?
Discontinuing?
Right, discontinuing.
Yes, there will be some models that will be discontinued either because they don't meet the new standard and it's relatively difficult to achieve that and it can be covered by another model. Or in some cases, the model usage is extremely low and it doesn't necessarily warrant developing a new product that meets the standard. Also, I would say that we will have a full product line available that meets the new standard, but that doesn't necessarily mean there won't be new products that come to market sometime shortly after April 16th. So certainly we have been tied up. A lot of the resources have been dedicated, as you can imagine, from an engineering product development standpoint to meet this new standard. When we're through this, it frees up a lot of opportunities for Bradford White to get back to what we really feel we're good at, which is developing new products that our customers really want, instead of designing product to meet the government regulations.
Okay, now a question just came in about the requirements. Are these for specific states or throughout the United States?
This is a federal requirement, so it applies to all of the states as well as the territories governed by U.S. law. So, for example, Puerto Rico is also included as well as the 50 states.
Okay. And also, what refrigerant will the heat pumps use? Will they have service parts?
Well, again, that can vary by manufacturer. There are various refrigerants that are used currently, and I would imagine there would be various refrigerants that different manufacturers use, so that will vary by manufacturer.
Okay. And are the warranties on gas and electric residential still going to be 6-year and 10-year?
On the Bradford White side, we will still offer the same warranties.
Okay. Another question came in. Will all model numbers be changed for Bradford White products for both the product that is affected and those that are not?
That is a great question, and the answer to that is the model numbers will change. And the model numbers will change for virtually all of the products, whether they are affected by this or not. And the purpose of that is that we can maintain some consistency in the model numbers. So, for example, we don't want to change the model numbers for the new products to comply and then have old legacy model numbers that might create confusion. So another question that we saw come up is, I think, do I understand it correctly that less than 20-gallon capacity are not affected? That is correct, but we will also be integrating the new model number sequence into those models, for example. So very good question.
Okay, and a couple people want to know when can they start placing orders for the new products? Do they need to wait until April of next year?
As it stands right now, Bradford White has decided to allow ordering of the new models beginning next week, understanding that the new models will not be produced until April of when they're required. So orders are welcome to come in, but the products will not be produced until April.
Okay, so another question is about mobile home tank size, that this is going to be a problem due to tight spaces in these locations. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, you know, that really rings true for all products below 55 gallons, not just mobile home water heaters. But mobile home water heaters probably are more susceptible to being installed into a tight-fitting closet. Really, the only solution that we see on the market for that right now is to grow in size. So the other option would be to put in a lesser capacity unit, where a 40-gallon now becomes a 30-gallon.
Okay, here's a question about inlet and outlet spreads. Are they going to change on similar replacement models?
I'll answer the question from Bradford White's perspective.
Right.
The 8-inch common spread and the 11-inch second common spread is what we intend to remain the same on all products. So even though the diameter of the outside jacket of the water heater may be growing, the 8-inch spread will remain, and or 11-inch.
Okay. And a question from Bill is, on a multiple unit application, can you put a new style with an old or replace old with a new?
That's a very good question. Yes, you can intermix old with new models. However, you would want to make sure to remain same capacities and same inputs so that the load is balanced evenly between the two units. Efficiency will not play a factor when installing multiple units together.
Okay. Now another question just came in asking, are you saying that gas water heaters over 55 gallons will require power venting?
Yes. The answer to that question is yes. Any products above 55 gallons, in order to achieve the new increased minimum energy factors, those water heaters will require some sort of electricity and blowers to push or pull the exhaust through the vent.
Great. This question in from Scott. How will this new standard affect general pricing and warranty standards on new hot water heaters?
Well, in a general sense, the cost of this changeover is pretty dramatic, so there will be a cost increase across the board for all products. As Chad mentioned, there is a little bit more of a radical change for products over 55 gallons, so the cost there will go up on a volume-to-volume comparison basis even more dramatically. And the warranty, again, we're still working out the details on that, but because of some of these changes and the dramatic costs and the opportunity to install different products, the warranty policy will likely be that we give credit for the failed heater, and the homeowner can choose what new model they'd like to replace it with.
Okay. A question from Mark is there an outdoor heat pump model available?
We don't know of an outdoor integrated water heater heat pump model that exists today for the U.S. market. There are some models I'm aware of overseas, but as yet they are not available on the U.S. market to our knowledge.
Okay. Here's a question from Rick. Will the heat pump models discharge cold air into the area they are located in?
That's a good question. Yes, as it stands today, heat pump products will discharge cold air into the area that they're in. As new products are developed, manufacturers are looking at alternative methods to vent that cold exhaust product, so to speak, the cold air, into another room and or outside if needed. But that depends on the manufacturer. That's not a regulation as a result of NAECA.
Right. Okay, this is another question concerning transportation. I thought the Bradford White heat pump heater could be laid down in the truck. Well, I guess that's more of a statement than a question.
That is true. Our design will allow it to be laid down on one side.
Correct.
And that is called out specifically on the cartoning. So that is true for our product design. We can't speak to other people's product designs.
Right. Now here's a question. When will the new plant in Middleville be fully functional?
Well, it's fully functional now.
That's what I thought.
It will be fully functional with the new product and the new product lines that we're putting in to be able to build the new product, actually starting next month and phasing in through March, and it will be fully operational and functioning building the new products in April.
Okay.
So it's kind of a phase-in period.
Sure. Okay, this question in from David. Is millivolt going to be gone?
David, to answer the question, millivolt technology is not being regulated out of existence. So, like I said before, the energy factors are the only thing that's being increased. How manufacturers produce product to achieve those energy factors is a different story. I can speak for Bradford White's perspective. We will still have millivolt technology on products below 55 gallons. Products above 55 gallons, most likely millivolt will be gone because of the requirement in energy factor is so high that the heater has to be so efficient it can't vent or it can't draft naturally.
Okay, now this is somewhat of a general question here. Does this also affect, meaning the efficiency standards, the current standards in low NOx areas such as Southern California?
Yes, it does. The same efficiency standards apply.
Right. Okay, this
so for the California market in areas covered by an Air Quality Management District ruling, the product will have to be ultra low NOx, and it will have to meet the energy factor standards. Okay.
Well, this is a good question. Do you think this will breathe new life into solar hot water?
That's a question. If you asked a bunch of different people, you would probably get many different opinions.
Right.
I think there's certainly the opportunity for that to happen, but we don't see a lot of potential in the solar water heater market at this point, even with some of the rebates that are available from government and utilities. It still hasn't gained a lot of traction. This could help that along, but I personally don't think that that's necessarily going to happen.
Okay. Here's another good question. Will parts for old-style heaters still be made?
Good question. So kind of the stance that Bradford White's taken is we've tried to incorporate as many old parts as we could onto the heater. So in that instance, yes, we will still be making parts, and it is actually in our business model to continue producing or have a stockpile of parts for old heaters on hand for service applications.
Okay. Another question, this is from Ross. Will the natural draft units still be available under 55 gallons?
Yes. So products below 55 gallons, the energy factor is still at a point where you can have naturally draft water heaters.
Okay. Paul is asking, will commercial heaters be affected by these changes at all?
As I described earlier in the presentation, some light-duty commercial water heaters will be affected. So if the water heater's capacity and input fall within the scope of what's defined as a residential water heater by NAECA, then yes, those heaters will be affected. Products outside of that scope, such as gas-fired water heaters above 75,000 BTU per hour, or electric products above 12 kW of input, are not affected by this change.
Okay, you mentioned NAECA, and a question just came in. Does Bradford White have a list of NAECA-compliant products or a cross-reference of old and new?
I think the answer to that question would be yes. Bradford White recently has introduced a cross-reference sheet into the field showing what the likely cross-reference from old model to new model would be. Now, keep in mind, this isn't a one-for-one cross-reference, so as these changes are the most radical that the water heater industry has ever seen, the options are much greater than just a one-for-one change.
Okay. This question in from Pat. Can we stack the heat pump style heaters in the warehouse? If so, how many high can we stack them?
Yeah, the answer to that question is yes, and that would be dependent upon manufacturer. So Bradford White specifies one height, whereas another manufacturer may specify another height. So I'd rather not answer that question and maybe cause some confusion.
Okay. Here's a question about thermostats. Will the thermostats have a higher temperature limit that is lower than the current models to save energy?
Could you repeat that again, Candace?
Sure. Will the thermostats have a higher temperature limit that is lower than the current models to save energy?
Again, the answer to that will depend on the manufacturer, but for our standard product, the temperature ranges for the thermostat will be the same as they are currently. There are some other DOE activities on the horizon that may affect that moving forward, but for the April 2015 requirement, we don't see that that's going to change. But again, other manufacturers may take a different approach to that.
Okay. So question from Greg is, do you have an idea of how much free airspace is going to be required for 75-gallon heat pump water heaters? For example, the size of the room that the heater is located in.
Yeah, typically most heat pumps on the market today require 700 to 1,000 cubic feet of room space. So that's essentially a 10 by 10 room, 10 foot tall or 7 foot tall. So as it stands today, that's about the size of the room that would be needed. Now, if heat pumps are introduced that can be ducted to other rooms, that product could potentially be installed into a smaller room and ducted to a larger room to satisfy the requirements.
Okay, this just in from Patrick. What is the typical height requirement for a 50-gallon heat pump water heater?
I don't know that you can say there is a typical requirement because there's a wide variation amongst the different 50-gallon heat pump water heaters that are currently on the market. So I guess the best answer to that would be to look at the individual manufacturer's spec sheets. Okay.
Now, I don't know if we answered this question during the presentation, but this is Danny's question. Do the new codes have an effect on the solar tanks?
Very good question. So as the law is written today, it is unclear whether or not solar water heaters are affected. The Department of Energy has requested additional information from the industry as well as from other customers to really put a black and white answer in the ground whether or not solar water heaters are affected. But as it is written today, it's in the gray area.
Okay. Another question about the new rules and what they affect. Do these new rules affect the combination space water heating combination units?
Again, as it's written today, no. The combination units do not get a energy factor assigned to them, nor do they need to be tested to an energy factor. Therefore, the combi units are not affected by NAECA 3.
Okay. Here is a question from William. We lease heaters to customers. Will there be a significant increase in pricing for the new units coming next year? This could play factor into replacements with old going to new and the leasing amount paid by customers.
The answer is yes, there will be a significant increase in the pricing. And again, it will vary by the capacity and the technology that's used.
Okay. This just in from Bob. Will venting sizes decrease due to input reductions on gas models?
Very good question. The venting sizes is not regulated by the manufacturer typically. Venting lengths are typically regulated by local codes and or National Fuel and Gas Code. As far as the diameter, that may change. So the diameter of the heat exchanger tube inside the water heater could be chosen to be a smaller size or possibly a larger size based on the manufacturer. But as far as venting lengths and sizes, that's restricted by local codes or National Fuel and Gas Code.
Okay. This is from Stephen. When will Bradford White stop making current product?
Well, again, our plan is to make the current product up until the required changeover date, but there will be some product that we start to manufacture prior to that. But again, in a general sense, our plan is to continue to make the existing product up until the changeover date on April 16th.
Okay. This question from Robert. Will Bradford White look to include mixing valves with products?
There are some products that we include mixing valves with. They're generally the ones with the higher temperature thermostats, and we would continue to do that. Mixing valves might be an option for the installer, the contractor, to work with to take care of a particular application need.
Okay, here is a question about wholesalers. Will wholesalers be able to sell current product lines beyond the April deadline to deplete on-hand inventory?
Yes, this is a manufacturing cutoff date. So the April 16th date applies to the manufacturer, and that's the date at which we have to begin building the new product that meets the new energy efficiency standards. So the way that the regulations are written, it allows for the sale and installation of the older style product as long as it's in the channel of distribution. One caution, I will say that in the past when we've seen some of these changeovers, for example, the previous DOE changeover in 2004 and the flammable vapor ignition resistant changeover in 2003, local codes can still make a determination that they require the newest product to be installed. So I'll say, with the caveat that local code always prevails, the product can continue to be sold as long as it was manufactured prior to the changeover date.
Okay. When will your price increase information be available to our retailers, wholesalers?
Well, again, we can't talk about anything specific with the price or the price increase other than to say that we have already published the new models and the new pricing information to our wholesalers. So if somebody has a specific question they can ask the wholesaler or contact their Bradford White rep.
There ended up being like 850 people that signed on.
Okay, this is from George. Are tankless water heaters affected?
Are tankless water heaters
technically, tankless water heaters are affected because the minimum efficiency rate was increased from 0.62 EF to 0.82 EF. But in reality, they're not really affected because most of the tankless water heaters on the market already meet the 0.82 energy factor requirement.
Hey, this question is from Donald. Will efficiency savings of utilities ever make up the difference in the price increase in the newer models?
Again, that's going to depend on the model, the cost of the utilities, and the usage of the appliance. I can tell you that in DOE's modeling of this and the determination, they have set it up so that there should be a payback for the investment in the new equipment. In some cases, that will be the case. In other cases, quite honestly, it will not be.
Okay. This question is from Joe. As a home builder, if the building permit is pulled prior to April 15th, 2015, can the regular 80-gallon electric be used without a code issue?
Yeah, like I said earlier, as the law is written, this is strictly a manufacturer cutoff date. So as long as that 80-gallon electric water heater is in the distribution pipeline at any point, whether it's at the distributor or at the contractor warehouse, it can be installed in that application after the April 16th date.
This question is from James. Is there a legal maximum water temperature for a residential application?
That's a pretty good question. So unrelated to the NAECA change, there is a requirement for maximum temperatures of residential water heaters. So residential water heaters must pass build-up tests where the temperature of the water coming out of the heater can't exceed a certain temperature. So to answer the question, yes, there is maximum temperatures required for residential water heaters, but unrelated to this NAECA change.
Okay. Ray would like to know, will the new heaters affect performance of hot water circulating pumps?
Will the new heater, I want to ask that question again. So will the new heaters
affect performance of hot water circulating pumps?
Well, I think the answer to that question would be depending upon what new heater is chosen. Some manufacturers may have chosen to reduce the input of the water heater, and then in that point, then yes, possibly the circulation of the recirc pump would be affected by a lesser input water heater.
Okay. Steve would like to know, what is the reason for the minimum room size on the heat pump heaters?
The reason for that is that the heat pump water heaters need ambient air to operate. So they're pulling temperature out of the ambient air. And if there's not enough ambient air, then they will not operate properly. So that's going to be one of the challenges in replacing a standard electric product now that might be in a closet installation. One of the main considerations is that you may have to put louvers in the door to communicate with the room outside, or you may have to relocate the water heater into a room where there is sufficient ambient air for it to operate properly. I'll also throw in that on the heat pump water heaters, there is a limitation for ambient air temperature at which they will operate properly, and that varies by manufacturer, but that could pose some issues for those of you who install water heaters in attics in relatively hot areas. So, for example, in the Carolinas, in Louisiana, and Texas, where water heaters are installed in the attic, the ambient temperature in the summer can get to a point where it will be beyond the capability of the refrigerant, and the system will simply revert to a standard backup resistance element water heater.
Okay, this question is from Bob. If one has to replace a heater with a smaller capacity heater due to space constraints, does Bradford White recommend installing thermal mixing valves to increase the output of the smaller heater?
Well, Bradford White always recommends the installation of a mixing valve to prevent from potential scalding issues. We may or may not recommend increasing the temperature of the tank, but certainly that may be an option for some customers in the event that a lesser capacity is not going to work in that tight footprint. But at the end of the day, an ASSE approved mixing valve is always recommended to be installed with a water heater.
Okay, this is another good question. Water heaters run more efficient at higher temperatures. Would a recommendation be made if a tempering valve is used on a lower capacity heater when dropping from a 50-gallon to a 40-gallon heater?
Well, that's actually the opposite, because the higher the temperature in the water heater, the more heat loss there will be. So if you run the water heater at a higher thermostatic set point, it will actually be less efficient. But again, this is a question that's come up a couple times, and I think it's a strategy that may need to be employed in certain instances where you have to downsize the water heater. You may have to put a mixing valve on to be able to provide your customer with the hot water usage and their needs that they're used to. So it is likely that will be a strategy that is used, but it certainly will not increase the efficiency of the water heater. It will actually decrease the efficiency of the water heater. That is not factored into the test procedure at this point in time.
Okay. Question from Mark is, how are the lowboy heaters changing?
The lowboy heaters is a very critical market segment. So again, based on manufacturer, one manufacturer may choose to do one thing, another manufacturer may choose to do another thing. But based on the increase in minimum energy factors, you can expect lowboy water heaters to grow in size from 2 inches bigger in diameter and then possibly up to 2 inches taller as well.
Okay, this question is from Steve. If I understand correctly on gas heaters over 55 gallons, that the new standard only applies to heaters with input equal to or less than 75,000 BTU. If so, do you think there will be more models that come out with, say, 76,000 to 80,000 inputs?
Steve, your understanding is correct, and there are some models on the market already with inputs that are over 75,000 BTUs, and I would imagine there will continue to be. I also imagine that there will be new products that are developed on the high efficiency side that may have increased inputs as well. And certainly I would think those are going to be some of the future products that come to market. Okay.
This question is from Jason. Will the electric heaters less than 50 gallons still be outfitted with standard 4,500 watt elements?
At this point, our standard elements will still be 4,500 watts. Other manufacturers may choose a different design, but from Bradford White's standpoint, that'll still be the standard wattage.
Okay. Question from Jay is, will the full line pocket catalogs with the new models be available in January?
So Bradford White has a full line pocket catalog currently today, but it does not include any of the new models. So it's our intention to have that full line pocket catalog available in the first quarter of 2015.
We felt it was more important to get the spec sheets finished first. And once we have the spec sheets finished, then we'll incorporate those specifications into the pocket catalog.
Okay. Question from John. Will the product that doesn't change but will have new part numbers also get a new UPC code?
John, yes. The answer to that question is yes. Any new product number or new model number will have a new UPC code associated with it.
Okay. We have time for one more question. This is from Thomas. The increase in insulation on 55-gallon and down units seems to me to negate the need to use an insulating blanket, often sold as an energy saver by contractors. Would an insulating blanket still be useful?
Well, our recommendation is not to use an insulating blanket unless it is provided by the manufacturer and specifically designed for that model. We have used insulation blankets in the past, and we will continue to use insulation blankets on certain models. But again, they are specifically designed for that water heater. And by specifically designed, I mean it has all the proper labeling, it has the cutouts to access the controls. So again, it is specific to that water heater.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm afraid that we've run out of time, and I'd like to thank Chad Sambor for an outstanding presentation. And we would also like to thank Bradford White Water Heaters for making today's webinar possible. Thank you for attending, and I hope you have a productive remainder of the day.